Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to join you in welcoming our witnesses to this hearing to discuss issues and priorities for the National Guard and Reserve. Let me say at the outset, thank you to each and every one of you and to the men and women that you represent. This hearing is quite timely given the President's recent decision to deploy the National Guard to the southwest border and his intention to use Department of Defense funds to build a wall there. I ask unanimous consent, Mr. Chairman, to place into record a letter that Senator Jack Reed of Rhode Island and I sent to Secretary Mattis earlier this month. We requested Secretary Mattis legal review of the Department of Defense's authority to use funds appropriated in the fiscal year 2018 defense bill to construct a wall. This letter lays out the case that the Department of Defense has no legal authority to build a border wall, with or without reprogramming, because the President did not ask for and Congress did not provide any funds that could be legally used for that purpose. Many of us were also taken aback when the President tweeted he was deploying the National Guard to the border. The President's claim that we face a crisis at our southwest border is simply not supported by any evidence. And it's particularly ironic when the President has said repeatedly that illegal border crossings are at an all-time low. I'm concerned this administration is diverting limited Department of Defense resources to the border to carry out a deportation agenda. Instead, the administration should rethink its proposal to dramatically cut foreign aid to Central America, aid that would help address the violence driving women, children, and others to our border. It's evident that the Pentagon was also taken off guard by the President's tweet. 2 weeks after the President's announcement, the Department of Defense still couldn't provide any estimate as to how much this deployment will cost or who's going to pay for it. Using past history as a guide, this deployment could easily cost hundreds of millions of dollars. Congress needs to know what's going to be cut from the defense budget to pay for this. I hope that General Lingle can provide some insight into the planning for this mission. I must tell you I have serious concerns about what an open-ended deployment will mean to the National Guard's readiness and the Guard members' personal lives, their jobs, and their families. For 17 years now, our nation has relied on the Guard and Reserve as an operational force, seamlessly working with the active duty force. It has been many years of high tempo. Under Secretary Mattis' leadership, each of you have made the readiness of your force your highest priority, renewing training efforts, modernizing equipment. This committee has repeatedly provided the federal funding that you needed for support. I'm eager for an update on your readiness levels and how we can further support you. I recognize strengthening readiness has not been easy, with continuing resolutions and threats of a shutdown and sequestration looming. It's been start and stop, and still you fulfilled your duties, and I thank you for this. That is not easy in any organization and not fair to our military and families who serve so selflessly. You can count on me to work with our new chairman of this subcommittee and the Full Appropriations Committee, Senator Shelby, to get the fiscal year 2019 budget process started as soon as we can. The three of us are sitting at this moment together are old school. We remember the Senate Appropriations and even the House Appropriations Committee that actually produced bills that were actually debated, that actually passed, that actually became law. We'd like to return to those thrilling days of yesteryear. We have other specific issues to discuss with the panel: water contamination caused by firefighting chemicals, cyber protection, and equipment needs, to name a few. I look forward to that discussion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. General Lingle, following up on the chairman's question, what's the average daily cost of a Guard member at the border?
Sir, I would have to give you a specific, for one Guard member on the border?
Give me any kind of range that you think is accurate.
It's the same as where he would be paid anywhere else doing any other job. There's no difference in the cost of having him on the border.
What would that be?
Depends on the rank, sir, and
Okay. Let me just ask you, Operation Jumpstart cost $1.2 billion for 6,000 National Guard members over 2 years. Do you have any estimate as to what this operation is going to cost?
Sir, it's difficult to estimate because I don't know how many will of that 4,000 the number will actually grow to, and beyond how long it will stay. I mean, I really couldn't hazard to guess yet on the total cost of this operation.
Can I conclude from your statement earlier that your current 2018 O&M budget could not cover these costs?
That is a true statement, sir.
You said you have to look around the Department of Defense.
The Department of Defense should work within the department to find funds to pay for this mission, sir.
There's been some comments by some observers on the statewide scene that we are diverting National Guardsmen from their traditional responsibilities and duties and readiness at home. There was an article in the Albuquerque Journal where State Representative Bill Camley said, quote, "We're going into forest fire season. The big percentage of state is in drought right now. And if National Guard folks are continuously rotated down to the border for a problem that doesn't exist, are they going to be available for a real problem when it happens?" What's your answer?
Vice Chairman, I would say that we have 450,000 men and women in the National Guard, and on the border today is 1,000. We could sustain that level without impacting state missions. Because they're under the command and control of the governors, we have the opportunity to, if required, right now we haven't had to go outside the 4 border states to serve the requirements by CBP. But if we do have to, and if this goes enduring in nature, we may have to go find some folks because these are citizen soldiers and airmen, they have jobs and other lives. We'll have to rotate them in. We'll go to places where governors have an excess of capacity to deal with emergencies in their state, and those people should volunteer and move to the border and prevent the mission and do the mission.
This question is for all witnesses. I was educated, informed, and a little bit surprised by this last appropriations conversation in the Senate of how many of my colleagues came forward to discuss water contamination caused by perfluorinated chemicals in firefighting foam. It was the #1 issue my Senate colleagues asked me for help with this year. General Lingle, I understand the Air National Guard has a unique set of problems when it comes to paying for the cleanup of these chemicals that has to be addressed by authorizers. How large is this admittedly major public health crisis of water contamination as a problem for the National Guard? Do you know how much it'll cost, how long it'll take, and do you need new authority to tackle it?
Yes, sir. It is a problem. I can't give you a total number of the of what it may take to mitigate it. There are many installations, as you know, that have the potential to have PFAS and PFOA in their water system. So the first thing we need to do is inspect them, determine if there's a determined amount in the water. If there is, and the government's determined to be liable, then we're going to have to find a way to mitigate that to make the water safe to drink for the communities.
Department of Defense has identified 401 active and BRAC installations where there are 1 or more areas with known or suspected release of these chemicals. Under OSD's guidance, the services are conducting preliminary assessments and site inspections and cutting off exposure where they can. Currently, 90 installations are above EPA's lifetime health advisory. I also understand that you're seeking an NDAA provision to allow the National Guard to qualify for use of funds in the Defense Environmental Restoration Account. Right now, only active duty can use these funds. Could you explain?
Yes, sir. Determination was made by General Counsel in the Department of Defense that said state-run facilities weren't eligible to access the DERA account. And if we had to spend money to mitigate these PFOA issues, that we were going to have to use Air National Guard or Army National Guard operations and maintenance money to do it. And obviously, we don't have that money in our account. So we need access, like the active component, to the DERA account.
What my colleagues have told me is that the use of this fire retardant, this foam, has resulted in a public health hazard and a danger to water supplies in the area of these installations. I can't tell you how many of them came to me from all over the United States saying we need cleanup money right now because of the danger to our community. Do you sense this is a matter of some urgency?
I do, Senator. Yes, I do. We owe it to the public to make sure that we inspect these facilities and determine if they have a problem, and if they have one and we're liable for it, then we need to mitigate it.
I'd like to ask just one general question. We have decided on a bipartisan basis in Congress to make a massive investment in our military for readiness. Some $80 billion over the budget for this year and similar amount next year. We don't know what happens in the 3rd year. If it reverts back to sequestration levels, it will be a dramatic cut. I am sure we all share concern that we don't have enough resources going into our national readiness and defense, but I share an equal concern that we're putting too much in too fast and that we may look back with regret as to how it's being spent. I've talked to Secretary Mattis about this. He sent out letters, I think, for all to consider about his own concerns. Tell me how you and your colleagues here are addressing this concern about spending this massive investment so quickly and wisely.
Yes, Senator. Well, I think that, our direction is to spend it on readiness of the force, to make sure it is a lethal force, to actually everything inside the National Defense Strategy as this operational reserve that we are all a part of now, as our active components rely on us to be there and to be ready to defend the nation and our interests around the world. That's the number one priority that we're doing. The services have needs to recapitalize and modernize that we've been underfunded because of budget uncertainty and drawdowns over the past years, that I say with some certainty that we have appropriate places to increase the lethality and modernize the force to spend that money appropriately.
We'll be watching one another closely. Thank you.
Yes, sir.